When we were first introduced to Nebuchadnezzar's statue, do you remember that he had a dream and he saw it as so significant that he wouldn't tell his advisors what the dream was? He wanted to know in particular the answer to the dream, and the only way he could know for sure whether this was the answer to the dream is whether the gods would tell his advisors also what the dream was. Then he could be confident of the solution. So you can see it was a great mystery that weighed on his heart, and he was pretty sure that it had worldwide impact. Well, as it does, we are going to live out the Nebuchadnezzar statue in the rest of the course, because it's going to outline for us each of the succeeding kingdoms that Scripture and God's people are going to have to deal with. So let's take a look at that statue once again. The head had to do with Babylon. The arms and chest is Medo-Persia. The thighs and the belly is Greece. Rome is the legs. And then there is a strange admixture of elements that don't really stick together. The feet of iron and clay. And then, of course, you know the story of the stone that's going to bring the whole collapse of the kingdoms of this world. We'll talk about that in a minute. This statue of Nebuchadnezzar's aligns with the four beasts that Daniel dreams about in Daniel chapter 7. So Babylon is the lion, Medo-Persia is the bear, Greece is the leopard, and Rome is that terrifying beast that's almost unrecognizable. In Daniel chapter 8, he focuses on two of those middle kingdoms, and so you read about a ram and a goat going to war. In this case, the ram is Medo-Persia, and the goat is Greece. So those are the biblical evidence for the kingdoms that are coming. Here's our timeline. So Babylon, from around 626 to 539, when Medo-Persia will bring about its collapse. Medo-Persia will last until around 330, when Alexander the Great sweeps through. And when Alexander the Great dies, the kingdom is divided up into to his four generals. The ones in particular that we'll want to pay attention to is the general who controls Egypt and the general who controls Syria, because at one time or another during the intertestamental period, Palestine will be controlled either by Egypt or by Syria, as we'll see. That is the period that is sometimes referred to as the Maccabean period. It is the period of the Hasmoneans, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about how history changed in between the two testaments. And then, of course, in 63 BC, through the end of our course and well into the first and second centuries and third centuries AD, you will watch as Rome grows into an empire and then begins to collapse. But for our purposes, we're going to finish up our study in the Bible as history at around 100 AD, which during that time then we will see the fall of Jerusalem to Roman forces as a result of their rebellion. So that's our timeline. Let's go back and visit each of the nations then and see what those animals, what the gold and the other metals represent. So Babylon has a head of gold. Remember, Nebuchadnezzar interpreted, I'll be the whole statue. He sets up a huge statue of gold that everybody would bow to, but he is the head. And that indicates that gold is the precious metal, the most precious metal in the statue, and he is the lion, which gives you the symbol of the empire. We looked at his wall on the promenade, and then a symbol of nobility. It's two things is interesting here as we look at the statue. Notice that the metals decrease in value, right? Gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay, but they increase in strength, with the exception of that iron and clay admixture that doesn't. What it says about Babylon is pretty unique. It says Babylon would be a lion, but a man's heart is given to it. And this may have been that study in Nebuchadnezzar in which Nebuchadnezzar turns and finds God in the midst of his empire, because his sanity, as it turns out, depends on his humility. So that's Babylon. Then we have Medo-Persia's next. We have the two limbs on the statue of the man, and we have the beast who walks with an uneven gait. And the point of that is that Persia is really the more powerful partner in the Medo-Persian alliance. Media is a little bit up farther north of Persia and a little bit east. And so they have combined together at this time and been able to beat Babylon, but one nation is more powerful than the other. So that is Medo-Persia, and that's the whole Persian Empire that we'll talk about in another video, the Achaemenid dynasty that rules and allows Israel to return to its homeland. So that's Medo-Persia. So we have Babylon, then Medo-Persia, and then Greece. Greece is represented in the beast by the leopard because of Alexander's incredible speed at conquering, so that at age 29 he has conquered most of his known world and despairs that there's no more worlds left to conquer. But then, just as quickly, Alexander passes off the scene and his empire becomes divided into four parts. Lysimachus takes Thrace and Asia Minor. Cassander takes Macedonia and Greece, what we would call maybe Greece proper. Then Ptolemy takes Egypt, and Seleucus takes Asia and Mesopotamia. The last two are particularly important for our study because during that Maccabean period, Palestine changes rule. So Palestine, the area of the Holy Land, where Israel was and is, was ruled by Egypt first, and then power switched over into the hands of the Seleucids. And it's under the Seleucids that we'll meet characters like Antiochus Epiphanes and like that. So we have Greece coming on the scene, and you can see that there's a political change that's happening that will eventually take us from what we see as the Old Testament world into all the changes that the New Testament world represents. And that's our fourth kingdom. Rome is the strongest metal in Nebuchadnezzar's statue. It's the strongest military strength, but it lacks the shine of a Nebuchadnezzar and of Babylon, the sense of abundance. But it is strong militarily, stronger than any of the other empires that have come to this point. This is in part because of Julius Caesar, and then his son Caesar Augustus or Octavian, and we're going to watch him in particular move across the pages of Scripture during the time of Christ. So those are our four kingdoms. They're going to play out in world affairs, and I thought it would be good to make sure that we had those nailed down because that's the background for what turns out to be the rest of our course. It's interesting to me that Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar saw those succeeding kingdoms well before they ever came to be. Thanks for listening.